Ezekiel 9 through 12. I'd like to go back to chapter 8 actually for this reading. Again, if there's any doubt in the story of Israel, what causes God's anger, wrath, punishment, jealousy, it is the issue of idolatry, which we've talked about. But listen to this interesting story in chapter 8. Actually, it goes into chapter 10 as well, but it begins in 8:3. He, that seems to be God. God is, again, now, Ezekiel is in Babylon, thousands of miles away, and yet he has visions of Jerusalem. This is, by the way, if you are looking at Jerusalem from the south, from the hill that's on the south side of Jerusalem, looking north, there's a pair of hills that are visible. One is called Zion in the text. It's Mount Moriah. Then there's a valley, a very steep valley, Valley Kidron, and then there's a sharp ascent onto the eastern hill, it's called in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, it will be called the Mount of Olives. So the story that we're going to read depends on this topography. 8:3, He, God, stretched out the form of a hand and took me by a lock of my hair, and the Spirit lifted me up between earth and heaven. That's a definition of a vision, I guess, where he's in some kind of a trance and God is showing him something, and brought me in visions of God to Jerusalem. So now by vision, Ezekiel is brought to the holy city of Jerusalem, to the door of the north gate of the inner court. So it would be on the north gate. This is the south side, so just around the top there. He is brought in vision form to the north gate of the inner court, where the seat of the image of jealousy was, which provokes to jealousy. It's the standard word for jealousy in the Old Testament. We don't know what this image is. It seems to be some kind of a idol. If it fits the story of the history, we have an Asherah pole there, put there by Manasseh and taken out by Josiah later, so possibly that. But the point is, there is some kind of an idol that's in the courtroom, the north side of the temple. 8:4, and behold, the glory of the God of Israel was there, like the vision that I saw in the plain. Now here's what's interesting is so there's an image of an idol. Again, we don't know which idol it is, but then we have God's glory. Now we're told several times of this idea called God's glory. It's the Hebrew word kavod. Heaviness is really the base meaning of kavod. So when we talk about the glory of God being seen, we're not sure what they see. Could be light, could be a fog, it could be a cloud. There's various ways that it is described in visual form. But in Ezekiel we have this vision, and see what we have so far. We have an idol that's on the north side of this temple, and now we have the glory of God coming to the temple. You can kind of predict possibly what's going to happen. Remember how God is jealous for worship. And what do you think will happen? Well, 10:4 gives us the answer. Then the glory of the Lord went up from the cherub and paused over the threshold of the temple. It's as though the glory of Yahweh basically says this. And of course, there's no words. I'm filling in an idea here, but we think this is what happens. God says, you've got a choice to make. Do you want the image or do you want me? Do you want the real thing or do you want the false? Do you want the created or do you want the creator? The people have made their choice. They are going to have that image and they're going to stick with it. So what the glory of God does is it departs and it stands over the doorway, the threshold of the temple. 10:18, then the glory of the Lord departed from the threshold of the temple and stood over the cherubim. We're not sure where that is, but it seems to be leaving. And the cherubim lifted their wings and mounted up from the earth in my sight. It's as though they pick up the glory of God. These cherubim hoisted up. When they went out, the wheels went beside them, and they stood at the door of the east gate of the Lord's house. So somewhere along here, there's a gate. This is east. And they stood at the gate of Zion, or Jerusalem. And the glory of the God of Israel was above them. So here's the glory taking, as it were, a path going out of the city of Jerusalem. Then up to chapter 11, verse 23. And the glory of the Lord went up from the midst of the city and stood on the mountain, which is on the east side of the city. So what happens is, again, a very picturesque way of describing what God's reaction to the story of Israel is in this really long story made into one quick vision. Over time, Israel has chosen idols, not Yahweh. Yahweh comes and says, well, you can't have both of us. I'm jealous for your worship if you can't have me, if you don't want me. And he leaves. And as you stand on the south side of the city of Jerusalem today, you can picture this very vision, the exact path, as it were, that this glory left Jerusalem. This will be then indicative of the exile to come, that the glory of God is gone. And actually, east, of course, is the direction of Babylon. So the idea may be that the glory goes with Israel in picture form. It doesn't say that, but we get the idea that God may be following his remnant, his people, off to Babylon. One of the reasons we may think that is in chapter 43. This is way ahead of time, verses 2 through 5. Let me read a little of that as we close. And behold, the glory of the God of Israel came from the way of the east. His voice was like the sound of many waters, and the earth shone with his glory, and the glory of the Lord came into the temple by way of the gate which faces toward the east. The Spirit lifted me up and brought me into the inner court. Behold, the glory of the Lord then filled the temple. In the end of the story, remember how we said restoration will be the final goal of Ezekiel. The path of the glory of the Lord seems to follow precisely the backward route from Babylon back to a restored temple.